For eons, the universe had maintained a fragile equilibrium, governed by ancient laws that no one dared defy. These laws were sacred, enshrined in the unspoken code of the cosmos. The stars would burn, the galaxies would spin, and the civilizations that rose across the vast expanse would know their place. Each species, each race had its role to play. And for as long as the stars had glowed in the dark abyss, that role had always been the same. The universe had one rule: do not wake the human. The humans were an anomaly in the cosmic order. They were fragile, unpredictable, and above all, dangerous. For centuries, they had lived under the careful observation of the greater powers in the universe. The Council, composed of the oldest and most advanced civilizations, being older than the oldest stars, older than the galaxies themselves, had imposed this rule long ago. They understood that humans, with their volatile nature and boundless potential, were a species that could either ascend to greatness or bring about the ruin of everything around them. It was better to leave them undisturbed, to let them grow on their own, without interference. But as with all great rules, there were always those who believed they were above them. The Valorians, an ancient race with the power to manipulate time and space, had long been fascinated by the humans. They had watched them rise from the ashes of war and turmoil, their civilization slowly advancing toward the stars. The Valorians had observed them for millennia, studying their patterns, their instincts, their endless drive to explore and conquer. They had come to the conclusion that humanity could one day become a beacon for all the universe, a shining example of evolution, adaptation, and enlightenment. But, as powerful as they were, the Valorians could not help but wonder, what would happen if they gave humanity just a little push? The Valorians, in their hubris, decided to test the boundaries of the universal accord. They believed that the humans had the potential to evolve faster, to understand the greater truths of the universe more quickly, if they were shown the right path. So they made a decision: they would intervene ever so slightly. The Valorians slipped through the veil of space and time, their presence undetected by the watchful eyes of the Council. They infiltrated Earth's timeline, planting small seeds of knowledge in the minds of the humans, visions of otherworldly technology, of ancient civilizations, of the true nature of the cosmos itself. It was supposed to be subtle. It was supposed to be a nudge, but it was far more than that. The first anomaly was subtle, almost undetectable. A single human, a brilliant physicist named Dr. Ilara Voss, had been working late in her laboratory at the prestigious Curie Institute, a research facility located on the edge of a sprawling city in Europe. Her research focused on quantum mechanics, on the strange behavior of particles at the smallest scales of reality. But that night, something changed. As she stared at the data on her monitor, her thoughts began to blur. Her mind wandered beyond the numbers, beyond the equations, and into a place that was otherworldly. For a split second, the walls of her lab seemed to dissolve, and she was standing in the middle of a vast cosmic expanse. The stars stretched out before her, not as distant points of light, but as living, breathing entities. She could feel them, feel the energy flowing between them, connecting them in ways she had never even imagined. The flash of insight came in a heartbeat, and with it a flood of understanding. Ilara saw the universe in a way no human ever had before. She understood the patterns, the hidden connections that governed the stars and planets. She felt the pulsing rhythm of existence, a force that bound all things together. The concepts she had spent her life studying were no longer just theoretical. They were real, tangible truths that danced through her mind like electricity. And just as suddenly it was gone, Ilara blinked, finding herself back in her lab, her hands shaking as she gripped the desk. The data on the screen before her was the same, but something was different. She felt different. She knew something no one else did. She wasn't sure what had happened to her or how, but she knew one thing for certain. She had touched something. Ancient, the ripple effect. Elara's experience was not unique. Across the globe, others began to experience the same strange visions. Each one different, but all connected. Scientists, artists, writers, philosophers, people from all walks of life began to receive fragments of knowledge they should not have known. Some saw the history of the universe itself, as if the very past was being revealed to them. Others saw glimpses of future possibilities, of humanity's potential to shape the cosmos in its image. At first, the phenomenon was dismissed as a collective delusion, a side effect of stress or overwork. But the visions persisted. They grew stronger, clearer, and more frequent. Humanity began to change. The world's governments, unaware of the cosmic forces at play, scrambled to make sense of the sudden surge in intellectual and artistic output. New theories of physics were proposed, new forms of art were created, and new philosophies emerged, ones that challenged the very nature of existence. For the first time, humans began to consider themselves not as isolated beings on a small blue planet, but as part of something much larger, a living, interconnected cosmos. But for every human who embraced the newfound knowledge, there were others who recoiled in fear. The visions weren't just about the beauty of the universe. They revealed darker truths as well. The fragility of existence, the terrifying vastness of space, and the incomprehensible forces that controlled it all. One by one, nations began to fall into chaos. Some sought to control the visions, to harness the newfound knowledge for their own ends. Others sought to destroy it, fearing the implications of a species that could transcend its own limitations. Humanity was spiraling. It was no longer the species the universe had known, the fragile, unknowing children of Earth. It was evolving, adapting, and quickly approaching a point of no return. The Council's response: as the ripples of human awakening spread across the planet, the ancient races that watched over the cosmos began to take notice. The first to react were the Valorians, who realized, too late, that their intervention had far exceeded their expectations. The Valorians had underestimated humanity's capacity for change. They had thought that a small nudge would accelerate humanity's growth, but they had awakened something much more dangerous: human belief. The universe, as they knew it, was built on the foundation of reason and order. But belief, faith, and emotion were forces that could not be controlled, and humanity, with its boundless imagination and unquenchable thirst for knowledge, had tapped into something much more profound than the Valorians had ever anticipated. In the great halls of the Council, the ancient beings who had ruled the universe for eons gathered in solemn deliberation. The Council's members were beings of unimaginable power, beings who had existed long before the first stars were born. They had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations, and they had kept the fragile balance of the universe intact. But they had never dealt with humans before. No one had. "They've broken the accord," said Ithric, the eldest of the council, his voice a deep rumbling presence that seemed to shake the very fabric of existence. "You did this, Valorians," another member, the High Priestess Avalana, intoned, her eyes glowing with ancient wisdom. "You allowed the humans to see too much. They were ready," the Valorian representative Krelthar argued, his voice tight with tension. "We only gave them a glimpse, a fraction of what they could become, and now they know." Avalana's voice softened, the gravity of her words settling over the room. "They understand. They will not return to ignorance. Once they've tasted the truth, there's no going back." The room fell silent, each member contemplating the consequences. They had all known that one day the humans might evolve beyond their boundaries, but none of them had ever considered that it would happen so quickly or so violently. "They cannot be allowed to ascend this quickly," said Zelorin, a being of pure energy, his form a shifting, glowing presence. "They must be contained, erased if necessary. But if we erase them," Yitrick responded, "we risk a far greater catastrophe. We risk a war that could undo the entire cosmos." The Valorians, who had once been so confident in their actions, now faced the reality of their mistake. The humans, once insignificant, were becoming something far more powerful than they could have imagined, and the universe, old and fragile, was beginning to crack under the pressure. The Council's decision was made, but the question remained: could they stop what had already begun? The cosmos is an expanse so vast that even the brightest minds and most ancient races had trouble grasping its full scope. For the Valorians, it had always been easy to view the universe as a complex web of energy, laws, and inevitable decay. Their species had transcended the boundaries of mere existence, reaching into the heart of creation itself. They understood the delicate balance between the stars, the fabric of reality, and the infinite potential of life that could arise across the galaxies. But there was one rule that had governed them for eons: do not wake the humans. For the Valorians, it had been a simple matter. Humans were fragile, short-lived, and consumed by their passions and whims. The experimentations of their own species had shown that the humans were wild, erratic, and only half-formed compared to the advanced civilizations scattered across the universe. Even their best scientists, like the Valorian prodigy Krelthar, had known better than to disturb the humans in their primitive state. Yet, driven by their overwhelming curiosity, a few members of the Valorian High Council had chosen to break the sacred accord. They believed they could guide humanity, elevate them just a step above their instincts, just a nudge, a spark of understanding that could propel them toward greatness. They were wrong. Ilara's revelation. Ilara Voss could not have known that her late-night breakthrough would be the beginning of an unstoppable wave that would echo across the universe. As she sat at her desk, her hands trembling slightly, she gazed at the black screen in front of her. For hours she had been reviewing quantum data, strange energy fluctuations that defied every law of physics she had ever studied. What she had seen in that fleeting moment was impossible, beyond human comprehension, and yet it felt undeniable. Her breath caught in her throat as she leaned closer to the screen, trying to replicate the phenomenon, but the data refused to align. Her fingers hovered over the keys as she tried to reproduce the equation that had come to her during the vision. The earlier visions were fresh in her mind, fragments of knowledge so vast they hurt her head. Patterns beyond time itself, the shifting geometry of the universe, cosmic equations that no human had ever known. What was this? She had always believed the universe was chaotic, a place of random forces, blind accidents of matter, but now, for the first time in her life, it felt as though everything had purpose, that the stars had been placed where they were for a reason, as if reality itself was following an intricate design. "Is it possible?" she whispered to herself, her voice a tremor of disbelief. "Can it be?" Her question was met with a sudden from her computer. A strange pulse of energy shot through the lab, flooding the space with a soft, vibrating glow. Ilara's head snapped up as she watched the screen shift into a new arrangement, the data rearranging itself into something that made sense. A key to understanding something far beyond humanity's grasp. The light grew, flashing brightly, as if the room itself was alive. The walls seemed to pulse in time with her heartbeat. In that moment, Everything around her seemed to dissolve into a higher state of reality. Her consciousness surged, and in a single heartbeat the entire history of the universe rushed into her mind. She felt the birth of stars, the collapse of galaxies, the first stirrings of life, and the ancient civilizations that had once ruled the cosmos long before her species even existed. It was overwhelming. Ilara's breath caught in her throat as the flood of knowledge began to slow, leaving her gasping for air. She was back in the lab, but she wasn't the same person. Something had shifted inside of her. The knowledge she now carried would not be easily shared or explained. She could feel it within her bones. She understood the language of the universe, its subtle laws, its hidden connections. Her first instinct was panic. She turned toward the door, ready to flee from the overwhelming truth, but she hesitated. Her gaze fell back to the screen, the complex equation that was now far clearer than before. The knowledge from her vision, it seemed, had unlocked something within her. Her eyes darted back to the data stream as the computer continued to hum with strange energy. "I've seen it," she murmured. "I understand it." It wasn't just a theory anymore. She could see the universe as it truly was, an interconnected web woven with threads of energy and matter, each part influencing the others. Every decision, every action on a cosmic scale had consequences. And then it hit her. She was not just an observer anymore, she was a participant. Ilara was no longer just a scientist. She had awakened. The news spread quickly after Ilara's discovery, but it wasn't her actions alone that would forever alter the fate of humanity. Her revelation sparked something in the minds of others. More and more people began to experience the same phenomenon. At first it was isolated, only a handful of intellectuals, scientists, and dreamers, but soon it spread like wildfire. The visions were coming faster now, almost uncontrollably. No one could escape them. Around the world, artists found themselves suddenly able to create stunningly intricate works of art that seemed to capture the true nature of existence. Musicians composed symphonies that resonated with the very fabric of reality. Writers penned works that tapped into ancient knowledge, unknowingly channeling information that no one should have been able to comprehend. And physicists, much like Ilara, began to crack open the deepest mysteries of the universe as if they were no longer bound by the rules of reality itself. In a matter of weeks, humanity was on the brink of a profound revolution, a realization that the world and the universe were not what they seemed. Yet, the changes weren't all for the better. While some embraced their newfound understanding, others recoiled in terror. The visions that flowed into their minds were terrifying, a glimpse into a vast, uncaring universe filled with both beauty and horror. The realization of how insignificant human life was in the grand scheme of things shattered the psyches of many. Whole governments scrambled to contain the panic, to control the narrative, but it was too late. The truth had been revealed, and humanity could not unsee it. The Valorians' response back in the deep reaches of space. The Valorians were beginning to understand the full weight of their actions. At first, they had celebrated what they thought would be a small intervention, an innocuous spark in the cosmic darkness. But they had miscalculated. The ripples of their influence had traveled much farther than expected. What was once a carefully contained experiment had become an existential threat. The humans, with their frail minds and their deeply ingrained sense of wonder, had reacted in ways the Valorians could not have anticipated. In the High Council chambers, Krelthar, the youngest and most impulsive of the Valorian leaders, paced restlessly as the holographic map of Earth flickered before him. The blue planet glowed like a beacon in the vast void, but the energy surrounding it had shifted. "What have we done?" Krelthar's voice was strained with disbelief. "They've seen the truth. We've unlocked something ancient, Avalana, the council's eldest member, said solemnly. Something far older than we could have imagined. The humans are not just seeing the universe, they're beginning to understand it, and they are acting on it. A dark silence fell over the chamber as the implications of their failures sank in. The universal accord was put in place for a reason. Zellerin, a being of pure energy, said, his form flickering with bright pulses. And now the balance is tipping. Krelthar's hands clenched into fists. They'll tear it all apart, the humans. They cannot be allowed to transcend their limits, but they already have, Avalana replied softly, and they will not be easily stopped. The humans' first step. Back on Earth, the first few days after the revelations were chaotic. Governments struggled to control the masses and countless factions began to form. Some believed the visions were a gift, a calling to something greater, while others saw them as a curse, evidence that the universe was indifferent and cruel. But one thing was clear, humanity was no longer the same. In the heart of New York City, Ilara Voss stood on the rooftop of her research center, gazing out at the world below. The lights of the city twinkled like stars, but she no longer saw them the same way. Everything felt different. The very air around her seemed to hum with the energy of the cosmos. The visions she had experienced, those brief, terrifying glimpses of infinity, had shattered her perception of reality. Yet, in that moment, she felt a calm determination. The universe had shown her something. It had entrusted her with knowledge. Now it was up to her and those like her to decide what to do with it. But as she stood there watching the world unravel, Ilara knew one thing for certain. Humanity had taken its first step into the unknown, and there was no going back. The universe was alive, vast, and teeming with mysteries. It was a fact that the Council had long known but never truly understood. The universe wasn't just a chaotic expanse of stars and planets. It was a living organism, its movements, its forces, all interconnected and governed by rules older than time itself. The Council's purpose had always been simple: maintain the balance, prevent interference, and never allow the humans to discover the deeper truths of existence. But now, as Ilara Voss stood at the precipice of her knowledge, looking out over a world that no longer seemed like her own, the question loomed large in her mind. What would humanity do with the knowledge they had been given? The awakening spreads. When Ilara first had her vision, it had been an isolated incident, a breakthrough that seemed almost accidental, a chance for her to peer into the deepest recesses of the universe. But what she did not know, what no one could have predicted, was that her discovery would ignite something much larger. It wasn't just the physicists, mathematicians, and scientists who felt the pull of the cosmic knowledge. It was everyone. Humanity in all its forms, from the intellectual elite to the artists, the common workers, and even the children, began to experience strange, almost feverish bursts of understanding. Some saw the energy patterns that governed the universe, while others were consumed by visions of vast cities among the stars. Some became obsessed with writing down the patterns they saw in their dreams, and others began to build machines that were only theoretical in nature just weeks ago. It was as though humanity had gained access to the blueprint of existence itself. Across the world, chaos and wonder intertwined. The world's leaders were struggling to maintain control. The United Nations called for an emergency session, attempting to formulate some kind of global response. Countries began sealing off their borders, each afraid of the power the others might wield. Religious leaders proclaimed the visions a divine message, while others saw them as a curse, a sign that the end of the world had begun. In the streets, people gathered, speaking in hushed tones, unable to fully articulate the visions that had been burning in their minds. It was the unknown reaching out to them, and the answers had the power to both elevate and destroy. Among these people was a woman named Maya Singh, an artist who had recently begun to paint in ways that transcended anything she had ever done before. She no longer painted with mere colors, but with the energy she felt pulsing in the air. The lines she drew became pathways to realms beyond comprehension, vast networks that connected the very fabric of the universe. One evening, while working late in her studio, Maya stood in front of her latest piece, a chaotic swirl of electric blues and glowing oranges, filled with intricate patterns that pulsed as though alive. Her brush had moved on its own, the strokes appearing almost like an ancient language. She stood in awe of the work before her, unsure of how it had even come into being. She heard a voice behind her, calm and steady. "Do you understand what you've created?" Maya turned around sharply to see Elara Voss standing at the threshold of the room, her eyes glowing faintly with an inner light. "Elara? How did you—" "I've seen it too. What you see. What the world sees now." Elara's voice was quiet, but there was a weight to it. The visions are not just dreams. They're real. They're showing us the universe in its rawest form. But it's all too much," Maya whispered, trembling slightly as she looked down at the painting. "We're not ready. How can we be? This is too much." Elara stepped forward, her expression intense. "That's what they want us to believe. They want us to stay small, to remain in ignorance. But we've seen the truth, all of us. This is just the beginning. We have the power to transcend the Valorian's dilemma." Back in the distant reaches of space, in the towering citadel of the Valorian Council, the ancient beings who had once guarded the secrets of the universe convened. The stars themselves had begun to flicker erratically as the great council debated the calamity that was unfolding before them. Krelthar, the Valorian who had pushed for the initial intervention, stood before the gathered members, his normally calm demeanor now strained with the weight of their collective mistake. The energy in the room was charged, electric, as each being spoke of the consequences of their actions. "They've learned too much," Zelleran, a being made of pure energy, said gravely. "The humans are no longer in the dark. They see the very fabric of existence, and they don't understand the ramifications." Avalana, the eldest of the Valorians, stood slowly, her long, ethereal body glowing faintly as she spoke. "They are on the edge of transcendence, but they lack the wisdom to wield such power. If they continue on this path, they may destroy not only themselves, but the very balance we have fought so long to preserve." "What can we do?" Krelthar's voice was filled with guilt. "We cannot simply undo what we've set in motion. The visions, the knowledge, it is in their minds now. How do we take it back?" "They will not forget. We cannot erase them, nor can we turn back time," said Ithric, the oldest of the Valorians, his voice filled with ancient sorrow. "The universe itself has changed. The human race has crossed a line, and we may no longer be able to control them." The silence in the room deepened as the council members considered their next steps. For the first time in eons, they were faced with a dilemma that threatened not only the future of humanity, but the future of the entire cosmos. The pushback begins back on Earth. As the knowledge continued to spread, the divide between the enlightened and the fearful deepened. In New York, Elara stood before a crowd of thousands, her voice steady as she addressed the masses that had gathered to hear her speak. She had become a leader in this new age of discovery, and her words had become a rallying cry for those who wanted to see humanity ascend beyond its limitations. "The universe is not what we thought it was," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the crowd. "We have been living in a bubble of ignorance, content with what we thought we knew. But now we know the truth. The cosmos is alive with energy, with purpose, and we are a part of it. We can shape it, we can transcend it, and we can reach beyond the stars. But we must act now. Her words were met with wild applause, but not all were convinced. A smaller group, a faction of world leaders and influential scientists, stood at the back of the crowd, their faces grim. "This is madness," one of them whispered, a government official from China. "We are letting them destroy us. We've seen it before, the fall of other civilizations. Knowledge like this destroys everything. It's too much for them. They'll tear themselves apart." "We can't stop them now," another scientist replied. "They know the truth, and they will stop at nothing to unlock more." The Council's decision. Back in the Valorian Council chambers, the decision was made. They could no longer stand by and watch as humanity unraveled the very fabric of the universe. The humans had transcended the barriers of understanding far too quickly, and the Council was no longer sure they could control what had been set in motion. "We must act," said Zillerin, his glowing form shifting violently. "We cannot allow them to reach beyond the threshold. They are not ready. They cannot be trusted." "They are on the edge of self-destruction," Avalana agreed. "We must intervene before it's too late." Krelthar, still filled with doubt and regret, spoke. "But if we act now, we risk making them our enemies. The humans are unpredictable. They will not forgive us. We must find another way." But the Council had already decided. Their action would be swift, and humanity would not even see it coming. The end of innocence. Valera stared at the sky that night, a million stars twinkling above her as if whispering their secrets to the earth. She could feel the hum of the universe, the energy of the cosmos coursing through her veins. She wasn't sure what the next step was. Humanity had the knowledge, but where would it take them? She could sense that something was coming, something bigger than all of them. The universe was shifting, and it would soon be time for them to make a choice. Would humanity ascend, or would they destroy themselves in the process? Her thoughts were interrupted by the crackling of her communicator. It was a message, an encrypted message that had been sent by the highest authorities of the world. It was a summons, a command, "Meet us at the Central Summit," the message read. The world must decide. Elara looked up at the sky once more, feeling the weight of the decision ahead of her. The universe had revealed itself. And now humanity would have to face the consequences of what they had learned.